Hello everybody, this is Max again. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me again. We are now going to delve into chapter 1.2, the Templars and their friends. But before we do that, let me make another shameless plug for where to find the book on Amazon. The link is in the description as always. You can go there, find it, download all the videos, all the information that I'm providing here is all available on Amazon on this page. All right, as we move on, in this chapter, we will dive into the creation of banking and its controllers. There's a lot to this history, and there are several factions and events that has led us to the current system that we are currently slaving under. I will attempt to demonstrate as well as possible that the same players, the same satanic rulers, have been involved from the very start, and they are still very much in control. I will highlight some of the main events and tie them together in order to obtain a full picture, even if they do not seem to relate to each other. I will from this point in time call the Ashkenazi Jews the Khazarian Mafia, or in short, KM. I will also refer to them as J's, the first letter of the word Jewish. Whenever I mention the KM, you must understand that I'm always referring to the same people, the same tribe. So, we start the story way back in the Middle Ages, where a certain group of people emerged in our timeline, namely the Knights Templars. In the age of the Crusades, this is the symbol, the logo, the armed Maltese cross. We will see a lot of this going forward. During the first 50 years of their existence, Jerusalem was a Muslim territory. The amount of Christian pilgrims who went to Jerusalem was limited by Islamic law at the time. In 1096 AD, the first of 9 separate wars broke out. It became known as the First Crusade. The Crusades were religious wars, initiated and supported by the Roman Catholic Church. Their main goal was said to be the recovery of the Holy Land from Islamic rule. 3 years after the Crusaders left Rome and went to war, this goal was achieved. It was quick. Godfrey de Bouillon and his brother Baldwin, leaders of the First Crusade, became rulers of Jerusalem. The Crusades may have been romanticized in literature and movies, but the sad reality was that they were insane religious wars, focused on nothing but death, destruction, and forced conversion into Christianity. An estimate of nearly 2 million people perished by their hands during this time. In 1118, a French knight by the name Hugues de Payan founded a military order together with 8 relatives and friends. They called the order the Poor Knights of the Temple of King Solomon, later to be known as Knights Templar. These new orders sprang forward from a secret society called the Priory of Zion, an order that is still alive and active to this very day. With the support of the King of Jerusalem, the Knights Templar set themselves up on the Sacred Mount. Yes, that one in Jerusalem. Their official duties were to protect pilgrims on the way from Europe to Jerusalem. These must have been some very busy nights. Covering all that land, only 9 of them? Sounds suspicious, but I digress. Their not-so-official goal was to rebuild the Temple of Solomon that had been destroyed in 586 BC by the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar. Yeah, that's the same name as Neo's floating ship in The Matrix, the greatest documentary ever made by living man. In 1129, the Order of the Knights Templar received the official support of the Roman Catholic Church. The order grew enormously, and donations came pouring in from all over Europe. The Knights adopted a code of conduct in which they swore by oath unfailing obedience to the master. According to researchers, the principle of obedience made the Knights Templar lethal. They acted swiftly and with brutal force as they had been commanded. Absolute obedience to the commander, also called the Grand Master, was obligatory. At the height of their power, the order was comprised of almost 20,000 members. Only 10% were armed knights. The other 90% took care of infrastructure, logistics, etc. Even though the knights had sworn to a life of poverty, as in their order's name, the order was excessively wealthy, owning large plots of land, farms, vineyards, mills, arms equipment, and even ownership of the island of Cyprus. All over Europe they owned monasteries, castles, and universities. They were so powerful that they did not need to obey local laws. They could pass freely across borders, did not have to pay taxes, and were exempt from all authority except that of the Pope. Furthermore, everything they took from the Muslims in battle, they got to keep. One wonders, was this even legal? Absolutely yes. Pope Innocent II signed the papal bull Omne Datum Optimum in 1139. All the order had to do was to swear obedience to the Pope, and I imagine pay some kickbacks back to Rome. After all, it was business as usual. Now the interesting part, and the reason we mention them in this particular chapter. You see, there's one thing the Templars excelled in over all else. Banking. They had established the networks of banks in many countries that enabled pilgrims to deposit assets in their home country and withdraw funds in the Holy Land upon their arrival. By the 13th century, the Templars had become such competent and trusted bankers that European kings and nobles who embarked 2 crusades to the Holy Land often deposited large sums in their country to be withdrawn later in the Holy Land to pay their armies. The Templars even gave out loans to rulers. They truly excelled in everything they did. It is truly iconic that this occurred in the land where Jesus himself famously flipped over the tables of the money changers in the temple and condemned usury. The church now supported these practices without question. The hypocrisy is astounding. However, all good stories have to come to an end. In the early 14th century, the Templars met their final destiny. King Philip IV of France was heavily in debt with the order, and when he asked for even more loans, the order refused. The king decided that it was time for the Templars to meet their maker, and on Friday 13th of October 1307, interesting date, right? Friday 13th. A large amount of knights were arrested, including the Grand Master, Jacques de Molay. They were all burned at the stake. Since then, Friday 13th has been an unlucky day in common folklore. I tend to disagree, personally, because burning bankers is a good thing in my book. I can't see a problem here. Medieval document states that Molay called out a curse over the king and the Pope Clement IV, who had failed to protect them, and would even dissolve the order through his papal bull, Vox in Excelso, in 1312. Although he did dissolve the order, he did not publicly condemn it, as would be normal those days. 1 month later, Pope Clement died. 8 months later, King Philip died. Ironically, the Pope's body burned when the church where he laid at state was supposedly hit by lightning and burned to the ground. The king died of a stroke he suffered while hunting. Sounds very coincidental to me, but who am I to say? Was this the end? Hell no. Contrary to what our manipulated history books and scholars tell us, the order was still alive, and new orders were founded with new names that were basically the same. And so it went on. If you look at this picture here, you will see on the left the military orders around Europe, If you look at the shields, you will notice there's a clear cross there, right? On the left, you also have the shields of the different orders that were active at the time. So they didn't really go away now, did they? Moving on. The Jesuit order was a Catholic religious order found in Paris. Make no mistake though, this order was not populated by praying monks in monasteries or things of that sort. It was a military order of extremists who had sworn an oath of absolute submission to the Pope and their superior general. It was also documented that the Jesuits were initially all converted Jays. Where did we hear that before? When I say extremists, let me show you what I mean. I will read you out their initiation oath. Quote, I declare that I have no opinion or will of myself, but without hesitation I will obey every command I receive from my superiors in the popes and Jesus Christ's militia. I promise further and declare that when the opportunity arises, I will conduct a ruthless war, secretly or publicly, against all heretics, Protestants and liberals, as I am instructed to do so, to exterminate and destroy them of the whole earth, and that I will not spare age, sex, or class, and that I will hang up, burn, boil, cook, peel, strangle, and bury these shameful heretics, rip the stomachs and wombs out of their wives, and crush the heads of their children against the wall, for the purpose to destroy the horrible race forever. Unquote. Seems like a pretty interesting bunch of people, right? I've never heard an oath that is more psychotic than this one. A sanitized version of the same order or oath is that of the Freemasons. We will read that one later. We need to be rational about this, however, as in all aspects of the Khazarian mafia's madness only applies to the highest echelons of the organizations. There are plenty of well-meaning people associated who have no idea what they're actually supporting and promoting an ultimately satanic organization. What we're talking about is the top of the pyramid, the elite of the elites, also known as the Jesuit Council. Further on here, I will show you a pyramid, and you will find them in the dark yellow section. Beware, Satan's biggest trick is to convince you that he does not exist. I start to understand that now. Are the Jesuits Khazarian Mafia? You bet they are. Their modus operandi is exactly within their operating methods. Documents from the Golden Age show us that the Jesuit order grew into an extremely powerful group of men. Their influence went far beyond the religious world. It stretched all the way into the secular. They infiltrated the old Masonic lodges. The Masons were skilled tradesmen in the construction business. They worked hard with physical labor. The infiltrated Jesuits were allowed to join because of the contributions in the area of architecture, science, and arts. They were called free and accepted Masons, thus the Freemasons. We take a look at this little graph here and we see an obvious pyramid. We see the Masonic logo. We see the all-seeing eye up on the top right corner with a G. On the pyramid, obviously, the higher you are, the more powerful you are, right? And we see the plebs, the peasants, and the public dressed in normal clothes on the bottom of the pyramid. That's people like me and you, and obviously, in their mind, that's exactly where we're supposed to be. Moving on about the Masons. The Masons were very wealthy men with special knowledge of architecture. It is shown that they had a special interest in the Temple of Solomon, just like the Knights Templar. They were also interested in the preservation of esoteric knowledge, for instance, anything relating to the Kabbalah. The fascination of the Temple of Solomon was not the only link between the Freemasons and the Knights Templar. Even today, the York Rite administers 3 orders of Masonry, one of which is the Knights Templar, as I can show you here. There's crosses all over the place. Royal Arch Masons, Cryptic Masons, and the Knights Templar, all under one roof. The Knights Templars of the York Rite is a military branch of the Freemasons, just like the medieval order of the Knights Templar back in the day. They both used the same cross of Malta. So in short, the Freemasons were a highly secretive group of powerful Jesuits who had infiltrated the country's Masonic lodges around the world. And they founded their own umbrella lodge in 1717, the premier Grand Lodge of England, and that would turn out to be the salvation. Well, what happened? The Jesuits had become way too powerful to the liking of 80 heads of state worldwide who obviously felt threatened by the powerful order. They eventually banned the order and put pressure on the Pope again, Clement XIV, to do the same. In 1773, the Pope succumbed to their demands. He promulgated the Dominus ac Redemptor, the bull of extinction that put an end to the Jesuit order. It sure seems like history is repeating itself, doesn't it? But guess what? It did not end there. Just like the Knights Templars before them, they continued, using another name, in this case the Freemasons, who at this point was Jesuit to its core. 1 year after his betrayal of the Jesuits, Pope Clement was murdered by poisoning. Where did we read that before? Just like the Khazars before, the Jesuits and the Knights Templars had a taste for revenge. Are we starting to see a pattern emerging here, dear reader? We can look at the timeline picture on the screen here, where we obviously see 1048, Sovereign Order of Malta, the start of the Crusades, 1096, Knights Templar, 1118 AD, Knights Templars dissolved, 1312, Jesuit order created, 1534 AD, and the Jesuit order dissolved in 1773 AD. Now, we can see a pattern emerging, can't we? Very revengeful, people in high position taking difficult decisions being murdered, kings and popes specifically. So we're not talking about a bunch of Boy Scouts here, all right? Now, let me show you the pyramid I spoke about before. This one is a very, very interesting document. And I will try to share my screen here, so I'll be able to show you exactly what this looks like. You look at the orange part on the bottom here, the matrix. The bottom of the pyramid is sheep, cattle, zombies, debtors. Human livestock and peasants is just slightly above the general population. You have another section where you have the world population control, football, religion, medical, government, legal, entertainment, right? On top of that, you have your corporations, your bankings, big pharma, energy, real estate. On top of that, you have world financial control, the IMF, the BIS, the stock markets, World Economic Forum, Schwab and his ilk, world institutions, the UN, the EU, the WHO, NATO and BRICS. This orange part is just the populace and the control mechanism. On top of that, we will find the secret societies. You have the hexagon group on the left. You have the octagon group on the right, both based in Switzerland, I might add. The Freemasonic lodges are in the center of it all. On the top of that side of the pyramid, you have the Committee of 300, the Illuminati, the Priory of Zion, and you have a little swastika up on the corner. Interesting. But the Freemasons are not really the power of all powers. You have the golden part of the pyramid where the Vatican is center stage, and the Jesuit orders. This is absolutely incredible. On top of that, you have the real mystical parts. You have the Anunnaki, you have Satan, you have Baal, you have common law on one side of the pyramid, you have God's law on the other. Those are the elites of the elites of the elites. On top of them, you have the angelic realm. And here you talk about the fallen angels and all of that. It's a very complex structure, obviously, but it's good for you to see how our world is actually structured in every minute detail. Now, said all that, we will move on in the next chapter and talk about the Freemasons and how they came to power. So see you there, max out, and peace.